When I remember playing Strider as a kid, I remember a fun action game about a ninja with a plasma sword. Then I played it as an adult. Maybe some games are better left in the past. So you play as Hiryu, a member of an elite assassin squad called the Striders. Hiryu uncovers a conspiracy between a section of the Striders and a shadowy organization called the Enterprise to build a mind control machine called Zane. He sets out to destroy Zane and dismantle the conspiracy, which leads all the way to Vice Commander Matic, the Strider's second in command. And the story is revealed through computer discs that you find throughout the game. And trying to understand the story just by playing the game is kind of confusing. I don't know if it was the port or mistranslations, but I swear there were even some characters they didn't explain who they were. And the story actually reminds me a lot of Metal Gear. You're part of an elite organization, you infiltrate another organization to take down some super weapon, and it turns out someone on your own side is a traitor. Only difference is, besides fighting a chicken walking robot with nuclear weapons, you're fighting an alien looking computer that controls minds. And Strider was a very Metroidvania kind of game. You visit different locations, but areas are locked behind security doors, and you need to revisit those locations once you find the keys to open those doors, letting you explore more of the map. As you play through the levels, you unlock different abilities, though, to be honest, I never found out what most of them did. You can pretty much get through the whole game with jump, fire, and heal. And let's talk about jumping. Strider is a buggy mess, and jumping is the best example of it. If you hit a ceiling, you might glide along it, or it'll just make you do a really short jump. If you hold the direction towards a wall when you're trying to jump, you can get stuck on the wall. And then the game expects you to do wall jumps. You get stuck on walls all the time, so I never really figured out how I was supposed to do a wall jump, and I ended up just button mashing half the time. And I'm pretty sure the devs realize this because most of the time there's a way around doing the wall jumps with an alternate path. And it's not just the jumping, the hitboxes are wonky. You take damage from spikes just by standing near them, but when you go to jump over them, sometimes you'll clip through them at the end. The game will freeze when other characters render in. Every time you get to a boss fight, you stand in an empty room for a few seconds before the boss loads in. And honestly, the jumping is the hardest part of the game. The rest of the game is pretty easy, including the bosses that you have to fight several times. Most bosses are fight 2 or 3 times, including a boss rush at the end, but they never change their tactics, so it's just the same fight over and over. Even Zane, the alien machine, you fight 4 or 5 times, and it's always the same fight, except for the very last one, but he dies in a few hits anyway, so it doesn't matter. Like I said in my Rygar video, a lot of NES games were designed to be beaten in one sitting. I ran through Strider in about an hour, which really made the repetition stand out. And the thing about all these bugs and flaws and issues, Capcom knew about it. See, when Capcom released Strider, they had this multi-pronged release plan. Strider got released on console, arcade, and Capcom teamed up with Moto Kikaku to make a manga. Now, as I said, the console version was pretty much a Castlevania. It was slower, there were puzzles, there was a lot of backtracking, and the manga had the exact same story as the console version. But the arcade game was completely different because the arcade had more power than a console. So instead of a Metroidvania style game where you have to find keys and backtrack, it was a more fast-paced side-scrolling hack and slasher with a completely different story. In the arcade version, you're just hunting down some guy named Grandmaster Mayo, which actually raises an interesting question because the Famicom game was scheduled to release in 1988, a full year before the arcade game was released. Which means even though more people know Strider for the arcade game, there's a good chance it came second. Or it was going to come second if the Famicom game ever got released. Because that's the weird part of this story. Even though Capcom was planning to release Strider on the Famicom, it got pulled at the last second. Capcom recognized the weird loading times, the sprite flickers, the buggy collision detection, and they deemed the game too low quality for a Japanese audience. They said Japanese gamers had come to expect more higher quality from a Capcom game. So they ported it to the NES and they sold it in America, with every single one of those bugs still present because they assumed American gamers had lower standards. And the thing is, they were sort of right. Strider got pretty decent reviews in America, even though reviewers noticed all the flaws. Along with the okay reviews, it also got some sequels. So all of the Strider sequels were also under threat of cancellation, and none of them really did very well. And eventually the Famicom version made it to auction sites in Japan and eventually onto emulators. And Capcom's multi-prong release strategy actually kind of ended up being a problem. Because the character Hiryu was created from the collaboration, both Capcom and Moto Kikaku owned Hiryu. They still share the copyright to this day, which is the reason Hiryu never made it into Marvel vs. Capcom 3 despite so many fans wanting it. Eventually they worked it out for Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but it's a messy situation when two companies own the same character and one of those companies doesn't even think that character is good enough to get their own game. Pretty fitting legacy for Strider on the NES. You know, there's something strange about revisiting some of your favorite games from childhood when you're an adult. I remembered Strider as a cool game about a ninja with a plasma sword. What I got was a buggy mess full of broken jumping, confusing dialogue, and some characters I don't even think got an introduction. The entire story of Strider, built by a team who didn't even think it was good enough to release in their home country, jointly owned by two companies who couldn't agree of what to do with the character, overshadowed by an arcade game with the same name made by the same company. Maybe Strider is a game that's best left in the past. What do you think? Am I just not appreciating Strider, or was it the buggy mess that I think it is? Tell me in the comments down below. And on a personal note, I'm coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this channel, and I would really love it if I could get to 100 subs by then. But while you're down there leaving a comment, if you could hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. It would help me out a lot. See you next time.